You're now listening to All Hog Sports, covering all Arkansas Razorback sports, such as football, basketball, baseball, and much more. Now, here's your host for today's show, Sam Stimson.
Saturdays in the fall in Fayetteville are back. Saturday, September 3rd at 2:30 p.m. You can get a top 25 matchup at Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. The number 19 ranked Arkansas Razorbacks face the number 23 ranked Cincinnati Bearcats on ESPN. It's a home game for Arkansas, huge game for both teams, so we'll be doing an in-depth preview of both teams. If you don't remember how I did it last year, we always did one offense versus a defense, one offense versus a defense, special teams, gave a little bit more info, and then got into my prediction, and we'll be doing the same this year.
Now, for the Arkansas Razorbacks.
This Razorback offense, led by quarterback KJ Jefferson, will be one of the best in the SEC. The SEC's number one rushing attack features one of the best running backs in the league in Rocket Sanders, and also a really successful quarterback in KJ Jefferson. KJ Jefferson is easily one of the best quarterbacks within the Southeastern Conference. The way he's been able to lead on this Arkansas offense last season and through spring and fall practice has been very impressive. Had a very successful 2021 season with the Razorbacks. He was one of two quarterbacks in the nation to lead their team in rushing yards and passing yards, the other one being Louisville's Malik Cunningham, very talented quarterback as well. Main thing for Arkansas, though, is open up on the rushing side and opening up on the passing side. And KJ Jefferson gives this Arkansas offense the option to do that due to his running ability. Now, in the air last season, he had 2,676 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, all very solid numbers there. And then he also had 664 rushing yards on the ground. Overall, KJ Jefferson was pretty accurate last season, 67.3 completion percentage, and he's been able to get it done. Like I said, the running game really opens things up for this Arkansas offense. And another thing he's been really good at is reading defenses in the run-pass option. So once again, all those things will be there for Arkansas this year. And a lot of people are concerned with KJ more from an outside's perspective without Treylon Burks. I mean, one of the best wide receivers in the entire nation, now playing for the Tennessee Titans. How is Arkansas's offense going to look? How is KJ Jefferson going to look? And all these questions being asked. And honestly, I'm not that concerned. KJ Jefferson led by a great support staff in offensive coordinator Kendall Briles, a great wide receiver core, lots of talent on that. I think KJ will still perform well. And I think last season, he was still a good quarterback without Treylon Burks. And a lot of people go to the Outback Bowl and say, oh, he kind of struggled in the first half there. I mean, he didn't have spring practice or fall practice in that moment. Now, he's gone through training in both of those. Now, Arkansas's wide receiver core is kind of inexperienced and hasn't really played much as a whole team. Lining up on the outside, wide receiver 1, Warren Thompson. 3 starts last season, 19 catches for 304 yards. Kind of had some problems with his hands, but he kind of got those solved out later in the season. More of a downfield threat, caught a very long touchdown last season in conference play. Thompson, fast receiver as well, former walk-on, just got a scholarship last season. He transferred from Florida State. Behind Thompson on the outside is Jaden Wilson, a redshirt freshman who appeared in a couple games last season but was still able to use his redshirt. Lining up in the slot, everyone knows his name, Jaden Hazelwood. Hazelwood, the transfer from Oklahoma, was a former 5-star recruit. Getting that level of talent at Arkansas, regardless of transfer or not, is pretty rare, and this Arkansas offense is going to take advantage of what he brings to the table. Him lining up in the slot is perfect. He's back on the practice field now in a green jersey as of Monday. He had some injury concerns, but now he's looking to be on track and playing in the Cincinnati game. Not really too many injuries for Arkansas. One of note in the running back room I'll touch on later. Hazelwood, though, for Oklahoma, 39 catches, team leading 6 touchdowns as well as team leader in catches. 399 yards as well. Lots of talent he will bring to this room. Also slot receiver behind him, Bryce Stevens. 4 games last season, played a little bit in the Penn State game. Lots of talent here. He had a lot of highlight reel catches in high school, so he definitely has that level of talent. Now that third starting receiver is wide receiver Matt Landers. Transfer from Toledo, had 20 catches, 514 yards, and 5 touchdowns at Toledo. 3 years before that, he was at Georgia, so he's had a lot of experience being a redshirt senior. Behind him is wide receiver Ketron Jackson, the fourth, receiver. He will sub in for Hazelwood and Thompson, even though they're both listed as starters. Jackson, 13 games played last season for Arkansas, did not use the red shirt. 5 catches, 97 yards, 1 touchdown. He will definitely see time on the field. I mean, he was so valuable last season, Arkansas chose to burn his red shirt. Now, tight end this season is actually Trey Knox. Last season, Blake Kern saw the field, but he has since ran out of eligibility. Trey Knox had 6 starts in 2020 at wide receiver, 14 catches in 2021. You might say, oh, wide receiver, why is he playing tight end? He's added 30 pounds to his frame, and if you go to his Instagram, look at his recent posts, see him at practice, he looks like a tight end. He will be very valuable at that position. He's got his hands right. I think Trey Knox can contribute at this position, and I think in terms of his long-term career playing in professional league, Trey Knox will be better suited at tight end given his height. Backup tight end is Nathan Bax, or Henry has struggled to see the field, struggling with some injuries and such. Bax, a former walk-on, he played a lot on special teams, but those two guys you will see at tight ends, see in 2 tight end packages. Now, running back Dominique Johnson is out for this game. He's been out a good amount of time in summer camp dealing with an injury, so he's not on the depth chart, will not be playing in this game. Running back getting the start is Rocket Sanders. We all saw how good he was last season. All freshman SEC team, 578 yards, 5 touchdowns. The way he runs down the middle it kind of reminds you of Darren McFadden a little bit. I know they wear the same number 5. I'm not just saying that to say that. The way that he explodes down the middle, that athleticism that he brings to the Arkansas running back room is very key. Behind him, running back A.J. Green, 221 yards last season, 7 catches for 84 yards. Been used in a lot of check down sets. He's very, very fast. 5'10 receiver. Oklahoma track star at his times in high school. And as you know, Sam Pittman always stresses the offensive line. What are you without these guys? Left tackle, you got Luke Jones, who brought you 13 games last season, playing in all those at left guard, left tackle. Left guard, Brady Latham. He's had 23 straight starts, been really healthy recently. Preseason 3rd team All-SEC. Center Ricky Stromberg, one of the best players on this team, period. 1st team All-SEC center. Been on the preseason watch list for the Best Center Award. There will be lots of NFL scouts in Fayetteville and where the Hogs go watching Stromberg and his play. He'll definitely be drafted this season, assuming he's healthy and everything. Only 3 sacks allowed last season in 13 starts. Right guard Bo Limmer had 11 starts at right guard, and right tackle Dalton Wagner, we saw a lot of him in 2020, but he was kind of reserved last season after an injury. And then backup right tackle Tykees Crawford for Dalton Wagner. He may see some playing time, 13 games last season. That was a really good competition in camp between both of those guys. Main thing, this Arkansas offense just has to stay dual threat and be able to move the ball through the air. And when you have a quarterback like KJ Jefferson, I trust that ability. Now, Cincinnati, one of the top 4 teams last season, made the college football playoff. And a lot of people never thought a G5 would make it, but this Cincinnati team was incredible defensively, and that's what ultimately carried them to their playoff berth where they faced Alabama. And as a result, they lost a lot of talent to the NFL draft. 3 defensive linemen drafted in their 2 best secondary, also drafted into the NFL. So as a result, lots of different looks here on the defensive front. On the defensive line, they roll with a lot of three-man fronts with defensive lineman Malik Van, 19 total tackles, 3.5 sacks, experienced as a redshirt senior. In the middle, you'll have Jawan Briggs, 9 solo tackles, 3 sacks as a reserve last season. And then you'll have Jabari Taylor, one of their better players on that front three, 12 solo tackles with 2 sacks. However, he'll move to a defensive end spot, and whenever they bring in 4, they'll bring in Eric Phillips, arguably the best backup defensive lineman, so then they'll move Taylor into that defensive tackle spot, but he'll mostly play defensive end on those 3-man sets. And then you have other guys, Dominic Purdy, and then Noah Potter. Additionally, this defensive line for Cincinnati, lots of inexperience compared to an Arkansas offensive line that returns a lot of talent and multiple preseason All-SEC nominations. I like Arkansas in this matchup up front. I think you'll see Cincy switching to some 4-man fronts if they struggle to create pressure. But, I mean, these are also guys, redshirt seniors, very experienced defensive linemen. And the thing is with Cincinnati, they've been recruiting on a high level and developing guys at a high level that's Power 5 worthy. I mean, they're headed to the Big 12, I believe, next season. They're a very good football team. You know, this is not a G5 where we're playing or an FCS school. This is the first game in Fayetteville, which is awesome that it's against such a good team. I love that. I'll get more into that later, but this is a really talented Cincinnati team, and whoever wins this game is going to get a lot of national recognition for it. The most talent on the Cincinnati defense this season will be at linebacker. On the weak side, you'll see split time between Jaheim Hamas, 9 solo tackles and 0.5 sacks last season, and Ivan Pace Jr. Jr. was a transfer. He was all-MAC first team last season. He had 6 sacks in a single game, 11 sacks on the total season. He can get a lot of sneaky pressure on the weak side, sneaking up to the quarterback. You may see him rushing some 3-man sets for Cincinnati, but him and Pace Jr. are both listed as or on the depth chart, so I think you will see split time between those two guys. Another split time at linebacker will be the sniper/dollar linebacker for Cincinnati. Deshaun Pace, returner for this team, 95 total tackles, 50 assisted. 4 picks last season, really good at chasing after and getting the ball. And then you'll also see Tyvan Fawcett, who had 70 total tackles last season. Starting in middle linebacker, we'll get most of the time, Wilson Huber. Reserve last season with 15 total tackles, 3 sacks, 4 tackles for loss. Really, though, the strength of this Cincinnati team is built in their linebacker core. They have 5 guys who I would deem starting caliber for the Cincinnati team, but obviously they're only able to start 3 of them with how they set up with the middle linebacker, the weak side linebacker, and then the sniper dollar linebacker, whichever one you prefer. Cincinnati will rotate, the sniper dollar, the weak side a lot, and I wonder if you'll see some 4 linebacker sets depending on everything. But like I said, Cincinnati defense, very, very smart defensive coordinator, is part of the reason why they went to the college football playoff last season. They were able to really effectively create pressure and really turned out well in their secondary with Sauce Gardner, Kobe Bryant. I mean, those guys are already making impacts in the NFL. That was a huge talent loss. But then you look at the guys who recruited and developed those guys, and those guys are still at Cincinnati. That's absolutely key for college football programs, recruiting, developing. And if they were able to do that to those guys, what they're doing now to the same players is held up. The status quo of your program and such. Now at corner, you can expect Arquan Bush, the field corner. He had 11 games as the nickelback last season for Cincinnati. He had 3 picks, 6 pass breakups. He can really hold his own in a lot of 1v1 coverage. That's why you'll see him take the wide field side. On that side, you'll probably see Warren Thompson, because I expect Hazelwood to line up more towards in the slot. So in the slot, you'll see nickelback lineup Sammy Anderson Jr., reserve player last season, redshirt sophomore, or Taj Ward. He was a reserve corner last season, but he did play a little bit more. He was a redshirt junior. Now he's a redshirt senior. Had 11 games, and then the year before that he had 9 games. He has seen a lot on the field, a little more experienced than Anderson Jr., but those guys will split time in that nickelback role. The final corner for Cincinnati, Jaquan Shepard, the boundary corner, and he was a reserve safety last season. Speaking of safeties, the starting safeties for Cincinnati, free safety Javon Hicks, 14 starts last season, all of those being on that college football playoff team. 31 solo tackles last season, 2 picks. He was really incredible last season in the more of like a boundary or backbone safety, but now he'll be the free safety for Cincinnati. Boundary safety, Brian Threats, 12 appearances last season, and then really the backbone of that college football playoff defense. Some really good stats that show you how good this team was last year and how well they're coached. Number 1, pass efficiency defense. They were number 2 in least passing yards allowed. Number 3 in completion percentage allowed. 57% allowed to quarterbacks. That's an incredible stat right there. Now this game is
versus
the Cincinnati Bearcats. And what they bring on offense is a lot of returning talent. 5 offensive linemen that started last season return. Left tackle James Tunstall, left guard Jeremy Cooper, center Jake Renfro, right guard Lawrence Metz, who will switch around along with Dylan O'Quinn at right tackle. Now they did lose Desmond Ritter, and they also lost Ford, and then Pierce, a wide receiver, Ford, the running back. And there's kind of a quarterback battle going on between 2 different guys, Ben Bryant and then Evan Prater. Now, Ben Bryant is believed to be the starter by a lot of Cincinnati fans, Cincinnati media, Cincinnati podcasts, things like that. Transfer from Eastern Michigan. He's a pocket passer, good arm, and throws the fade route pretty well. In 2021, he had 3,121 yards, 14 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Now his competition is Evan Prater, a former 4-star recruit, pro quarterback. He's athletic. He's a better runner than his competition, so he does get an advantage there. One of these guys will start. Fickle said they're not planning on splitting time. I do expect Ben Bryant to play for Cincinnati given the experience, but I wouldn't be shocked if we saw Prater either. Really close battle in camp. Now their wide receiver core returns. 2 starters, has a transfer, and then a reserve is starting this season. Tyler Scott, 14 games for Cincinnati last season, 5'11", great hands, 30 catches, 520 yards, and 5 touchdowns. You also see Trey Tucker, 34 catches, 426 yards, 2 touchdowns, 14 games for him last season. Jaden Thompson was more of a reserve-type player, but he had 208 yards and 14 catches. Very good yards after completion. Fast guy at 6'2". And then the transfer, Nick Mardner, 6'6", receiver. He had 10 starts for Cincinnati last season. Had 913 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. That 913 receiving yards is best for 9th in the entire nation. Transfer from Hawaii, definitely got to watch out for. Josh Weil last season had 8 starts, 20 catches with 352 yards. The Cincinnati core has a lot of returning talent. 2 wide receivers and a tight end. All have great hands. Nick Marner, great transfer addition, 6'6". Really talented last season. That big frame kind of helps him break through defenders. I mean, you kind of compare it a little bit to like guys like Traylon Burks, bigger wide receivers, and you saw what Traylon was able to do after contact last season. And that's part of the reason why Nick had 913 yards at Hawaii. Now, Cincinnati's running backs on the depth chart list 4 oars, and I'm going to break them down for you. Ryan Montgomery at 46 attempts, 312 yards as a backup last season, 3 touchdowns. Charles McClelland, 37 attempts, 190 yards, and 1 touchdown. Senior 5'11", bit of a quicker back. And then Corey Geiner, the LSU transfer, 5'9", a lot shorter running back. 79 attempts last season for LSU, especially later into the season. 329 yards, 2 touchdowns. Last year against Arkansas, he didn't do anything. 5 attempts, 12 yards. I do expect Ryan Montgomery to get the majority of reps here. He's also the punt returner for the team. Cincinnati brings a lot of talent back, and that 5 front and the offensive line will be a challenge for an Arkansas team that really struggled to create pressure on the defensive line and is on their 3rd defensive line coach in 3 years under Sam Pittman, and I'll be getting into that right now, previewing the Arkansas defense. Starting at defensive end, Jashad Stewart, 6'2", 251. 13 games last season, only 1 start. He was a lot on special teams as well. Behind him is Landon Jackson, the transfer from LSU. Played 5 games last season for LSU. A little more experience in the middle. Defensive tackle Eric Gregory played in all 13 games last season. Had 27 stops in 3 starts. Had 4 tackles for loss and 1 sack. Behind him is Terry Hampton. Terry had transferred from Arkansas State, 61 tackles in 4 seasons for them. Down the middle, defensive tackle as well, Isaiah Nichols, huge part in Arkansas's run stoppage and getting pressure to the quarterback. 3.5 tackles for loss and 1.5 sacks. Behind him is Cam Ball. And then Zach Williams starting the other end, defensive end. Returning sack leader at 2.5 sacks last season, 5 tackles for loss. Jordan Dominic behind him. I talk about this defensive line, and I think it's concerning based on last season and what we saw. Arkansas is going to have to take a step up on the defensive line if they want to win more football games this year. And I know that seems kind of cliche, but you look at the 4 games Arkansas lost. Georgia, I really don't think Arkansas could have done much. I mean, we were playing the best team in the nation that went on to win the national title. Alabama, Arkansas's defense up front did not perform well. The secondary didn't perform well. It's a correlation that I believe to equal causation between Arkansas's performance up front and then in the secondary. If Arkansas struggles to get pressure up front and gives Matt Corral 5 seconds to throw the football every time, he's going to throw bombs against us. And then when you have Jalen Catalon and a number of talented other guys out, kind of adds up, and you see it happen over and over again. A couple other things for this defensive line, tackles for loss, getting pressure, anything like that has been very low in the SEC, and that has to change this season if Arkansas wants to have a better defense. 2 guys at linebacker, Bumper Pool, 6'2", 232, team captain, preseason All-SEC, one of the best linebackers in America. He could become one of the highest tackle leaders for Arkansas. He's currently 9th on the list. Last season, he had a tremendous 125 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss. Drew Sanders, transfer from Alabama. He played in 25 games in 2 seasons, had 3 starts. Former 5-star recruit, 6'5", 233, very big linebacker, lots of talent there. Last season, 24 tackles as a reserve. And then Chris Paul behind him, and also we'll see some time behind Bumper. 4 games as a true freshman last season. He was able to redshirt. Now, I think Arkansas has a lot of secondary depth. Arkansas had guys like McLaughlin, Brini transfer in, and those guys aren't starting. And you can take it for, okay, so Arkansas doesn't have a lot of secondary depth, but I think alternatively you can look at Arkansas' secondary might be better than we thought it was, that these guys will still see a lot of time on the playing field. Starting at corner, you've got Ladarius Bishop starting 9 out of 12 games last season. Very fast corner, has to use his speed to his advantage. And Hudson Clark, the former walk-on, starting at the other corner position. Clark had, the game against Ole Miss, lots of picks, and then had struggled earlier in the season. But he's got a lot of praise from Sam Pittman this offseason, leader in picks in fall camp. And when you get that, you will start. I mean, when you perform the best in fall camp, you will start. And for him to hold that position, he obviously has to hold his own, be a ball chaser, and force stoppages. Some Hog fans will see this get concerned. I'm not too worried. Behind him is Dwight McGlothern, the transfer from LSU, played in 17 games with 6 starts in 2 seasons, or Kari Johnson. At nickelback, Miles Slusher played for Jalen Catalon last season as the free safety. I feel very comfortable with Slusher being in that nickelback role. Behind Slusher is transfer from Penn State. Trent Gordon played 8 games in 2021 as a reserve. He's a redshirt senior this year. And at safety, Jalen Catalon, team captain, All-American preseason for the 2nd straight season in a row. Jalen Catalon will hit, and he will hit hard. He's all over the ball. He's all over whoever has the ball, and he is going to make his presence known on that football field. When you watch Arkansas's defensively, games with and without Jalen Catalon, there is a huge difference. The presence he brings to the field is unmatched. You look at the games where he got ejected in 2020 in the targeting calls, and then you look at the games last season post-injury, there is a huge difference, and having Jalen Catalon back for another season not only boosts his NFL stock, but will boost the stock of this Arkansas defense. Lots of talent with Catalon there. Behind Catalon is Brini, the transfer from Georgia last season, who made 11 starts for the national championship team and got beat out by guys like Blair and Catalon. So I think that provides a good perspective. And then also the other safety, Simeon Blair, 7 starts last season and had 38 tackles. Behind him is sophomore Jaden Johnson, burned the red shirt last season. Like I said, this Arkansas defensive line and the secondary will go hand in hand. I feel really good about the secondary this season. Lots of depth. They just got to figure it out. Corner's kind of a mystery, but I feel better about safeties, nickelback, those kind of roles. But McGlothern, Clark, Bishop, all those guys will get things figured out relatively early this season, but we need them to be on their A game for the Cincinnati game. Quick little look at special teams for both teams. Cincinnati, Ryan Coe, 82.4% field goals last season, 100% on his extra point attempts, 65 points. Their punter, Mason Fletcher, 42.9 average punts. Punt returner, Ryan Montgomery. And then their kick returners, either Scott or Tucker, one of their wide receivers. Looking at Arkansas special teams, none other than the man himself, Cam Little, 106 points as a freshman, 100% extra point attempts, and then 83.3% field goal. Interesting note at punter, it'll either be Reed Bauer or Max Fletcher. I thought I'd throw this in there. Reed Bauer averaged 43.3 on 58 punts last season, but Max Fletcher, an Australian recruit, has a huge leg and can kick the ball up to 60 yards. However, control is a bit of a concern. Obviously, don't want the ball going out of bounds real early, but those guys are listed as or on the depth chart. Kick returning this season, you could see some AJ Green. There'll be a number of different guys till Arkansas figures it out, but Arkansas has to not have any special teams blunder. This is the 3rd season under special teams coordinator Scott Fountain. Keeping all 3 coordinators for 3 years is awesome. In that 3rd year, I think you'll see a bit more of a hump compared to how awful Arkansas special teams were under Chad Morris. I mean, that's a huge project to repair. I think you'll see the best season of Arkansas special teams since, especially with Cam Little. He provides a huge boost and just level of security of knowing that he's going to make those kicks. Couple of notes here before I hop into my prediction. Arkansas and Cincinnati have never placed each other in the game of football. As of Tuesday at 5 p.m., the spread is currently Arkansas -6, and the over-under is 52.
It's time for Sam's prediction. Sam's prediction.
I've got the Hogs 27-20. Why do I think Arkansas wins this game? I think we see a really good wide receiver debut from guys like Hazelwood and Landers. I think this talent in the secondary is also going to prove itself. Catalon being back on the field, huge for Arkansas. The defensive line, though, will struggle, especially against a Cincinnati team that brings back 5 offensive line returnees from a college football playoff level offense. And then they also bring in a number of other talent that I think gives Arkansas problems. This is a really good Cincinnati team. I can't stress that enough. This is a very, very talented team. A lot of people say, oh, they lost Ritter. They're not as good as they were last season, obviously. But this is a team that has college football playoff hopes. I mean, they beat Arkansas, and look at the rest of their schedule after they beat Arkansas. And tell me the games that they couldn't win. Now, I think Arkansas has to control the tempo of the game. I do think Arkansas still wins 27-21, but I think Arkansas leads for the majority of the game, maybe if they don't get the ball right away, but I don't think Arkansas is going to fall down by double digits or anything. Additionally, I do think Arkansas will throw some trick plays in there with Malik Hornsby. He's been playing some time at wide receiver. Obviously didn't throw the ball much last year, but I do think you'll see him get some snaps, maybe one or two, see what trick packages Arkansas can throw up, because Kendall Browse likes doing that in his offensive work. It's a tough road for Arkansas' schedule. Obviously, Cincinnati has a little bit of an easier one, but they start things 1 week at a time, and so does Arkansas. When you're playing a tough schedule, it's important to look at things 1 week at a time. Arkansas plays Cincinnati. True, they play South Carolina, Missouri State, all those teams later, but they play Cincinnati right now. You got to look at it one game at a time. Arkansas plays Cincinnati. Cincinnati plays Arkansas. And the winner of this game will receive major props for it. And it will put them towards a path towards trajectory, towards success, or below expectations. And this game will have a lot to do with that. I think missing Dominique Johnson from the running back group will hurt Arkansas a little bit. I thought his reliability last season was noticeable for the running back group, but I like Arkansas's chances. Now, this is just an update about the podcast and such. If you haven't seen, I've been doing a little bit of a rework in the description and everything. So we've completed the first 2 seasons of the All Hog Sports podcast, and I cannot thank everybody enough for listening and supporting the podcast. It means the world to me. And now I'm a student at the beautiful University of Arkansas. Season 3, though, is going to be a blast. Continue to do content here on All Hog Sports Pod. I'm excited to get some football back in Fayetteville, man. Very excited for my first game as a student. But y'all know the deal. As always, where to catch me next week. And signing off for now, Woo Pig Suey.
That's all for today's episode of All Hog Sports with Sam Stimson. Make sure to stay tuned for the next episode covering all Arkansas Razorback sports. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media too. On Twitter and Instagram at All Hog Sports Pod. Like on Facebook at All Hog Sports and Arkansas Razorbacks Podcast. And on YouTube at that same name. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Go Hogs!